Welcome to Mastering Life's Adventures, an educational podcast about tapping into your true self, the soul, the substance of your life, to discover what life's ups and downs are really about, and how to have a greater sense of purpose, peace, joy, and fulfillment. I am Dr. Judith Holder, your host, coach psychologist, fellow seeker who enjoys diving into the connections between spirituality, psychology, wellness, and your everyday life's adventures. All preparing and polishing you like the facets of a magnificent diamond to be your best self. If you're craving more from your life, you are in the right place. Come, let's journey together and transforming what you know into who you really are. Mastering Life's Adventures begins now. Hi, I'm back. I'm back with a guest who's going to be talking about something that I think is going to be very enlightening for everyone. This is about brain and what we know about mammals and their brain. So one of the things is this whole notion of the mammals and brains and who we are and in terms of where we are currently. And the twist is that we're talking about is related to soul growth. So our question is, what's the relationship between brain, impulses, and soul growth? Loretta, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Loretta Bruning, founder of the Intermammal Institute and author of Habits of a Happy Brain, Retrain Your Brain to Boost Your Serotonin, Dopamine, Oxytocin, and endorphin levels.
Excellent. As you talk about who you are and how you got to be where you're at, what do you think is this relationship that goes on in between of who we are and this, what's the relationship between brain, impulses, and soul growth?
Okay, so I grew up around a lot of unhappiness. My mother had a lot of drama, and I was always trying to make sense of it, like I think most kids. And when I was in high school, I discovered academic psychology. I thought, oh, this is it. This is the answer, and this is going to fix everything. I read academic psychology for most of my life, but as the decades went by, it did not work. It did not fix everything.
Why do you think that was? Why do you think that
I
was?
had thousands of students and children of my own who did not seem very motivated. And the insight that you got from academic psychology, I call it niceism, that if you're nice to everybody, then they'll be nice to you. But life is more complicated. Sometimes, like if you're nice to a student when they don't do the work, then they'll just not do the work. That's how the animal part of the brain works. A dog does whatever behavior gets the treat. Whatever behavior they did just before you gave them a treat, that's the behavior they repeat. That's how the brain works. So if a child is having a tantrum and people say, well, you should hug them, then that trains their brain to say, oh, so I explode in this way and then I get rewarded. So I started digging for myself, and I discovered a lot of books on animal behavior and the animal brain, and I just kept reading more and more about that, and I found a very different view of how life works. I read studies about dopamine in monkeys, serotonin in monkeys. When I say studies, often maybe it was just like one study that was popular in the past, but then was completely ignored today. And yet it felt like this is the truth. This is really how we work. So I thought everyone should know this, and I started writing books about it.
Because one of the things you're talking about is, if I heard you correctly, as you've moved forward in doing your research, looking at what motivates people. Yes, there are things that motivate us based upon bad behavior, and that gets rewarded. But there's also motivation of the soul. The soul's motivation is that it wants recognition so it can help you continue to grow as an integrated part of who you are. And sometimes that's a missing element that happens with individuals, is that they're missing that element and not realizing motivation doesn't come from external only. It also comes from the internal urge. And sometimes we take those urges and those impulses and we think it must be, I need more food. I need to eat this. or it must mean that I can be lazy because I don't feel like doing anything. And we misread the signals that are being given to us. Thoughts about that?
Our brain is not wired when we're born. We're born with billions of neurons, but no connections between them. And we're designed to be wired by experience. So each little experience wires a baby and a child to make sense of the world. The most important part of our experience is any moment when a happy chemical or a stress chemical is released, because that's how the brain learns this is good for me and this is bad for me. So a happy chemical is released when a need is met. And that's how a baby, child, or a monkey learns, oh, this is what it takes to meet my needs. A monkey wakes up hungry in the morning and has to look for food. It looks around for food, and when it sees something, that good feeling of dopamine turns on and it says, oh, this will meet my needs. And that releases energy, and the monkey goes for the food. So this is the good feeling that we want to have all the time, that spark of dopamine that says, oh, this is going to meet my needs. What gives us that is whatever triggered it in our past. So the peak years of neuroplasticity are before age 8 and during puberty. So whatever met your needs during those years, that gets you excited. And so then we all face this challenge that we're wired to do things that got us excited when we were young, which may have made sense for our ancestors because they had to learn to find food from their parents. And as soon as they hit puberty, they started having children of their own. So they were so busy finding food for their children that they couldn't be rewiring themselves. But we all have this opportunity to grow and to rewire. And this is a really precious thing that we can say, well, let's say a young person who got wired to every time they feel bad, they want to play a video game and they feel good. And it doesn't necessarily solve the underlying problem, but when you switch a bad feeling to a good feeling, your brain says, yeah, this is the way to go. So we're all challenged with that brain. And yet we all have the possibility to rewire it, but it's harder than we think. I always say that it's just like learning a foreign language. When you're born, you learn a foreign language without conscious study. And yet to learn it in adulthood is so hard that most people don't. So that's how hard it is to rewire your emotions.
That's interesting because I think the language analogy you're using, it's the same thing that happens with the soul. The soul has a unique language as well, but we misread the language or don't interpret it, or we end up getting stuck and not realizing it's the prompting of the soul that is asking us to perk up. I can help here. But we say, no, you can't, because we're so used to being wired to external things that give us rewards. And the soul says, we want you to transcend that. And we want you to come above that and have some discipline over the impulses, as opposed to the impulses having control over you.
Yeah, exactly. And we have the ability to weigh the short run against the long run. So if you have this feeling of, I want it now, it's not an intellectual thought in words. It's a real feeling. It's the dopamine is like, oh, wow, that's going to feel good, whatever it is for each individual. And it really does feel good, but we can redirect that electricity in the brain into a new pathway that says this other thing will feel better in the future. As the usual thing, it might feel good now, but it will feel bad in the long run. So once we know that these are just pathways in the brain, they're not reality, then it really helps us see that we have many other choices. We only see one choice because the electricity in the brain flows effortlessly into pathways that are already there. And to get it to flow into a new pathway is really hard.
That's where the great work is. It's a rewarding work because in the long run, it helps you not only to have more mastery over your impulses, but it also allows you to have a greater space. And that space allows the soul to evolve and grow so that that sage aspect of who you are starts to help and guide you. And sometimes we don't know how to do that. we get stuck, or we just continue along the same pathway, but that pathway is going downhill. And really, life and evolution wants you to go uphill, to evolve and to grow, expand who you are.
Yeah. And the good thing is that the growth is also a real physical thing. If you repeat the new choice over and over, you build a new neural pathway and it starts to get easier.
Correct. And that's the key thing that the soul wants you to be aware of, is that once we're able to understand, I am a spiritual being having a human existence, and my brain is a vehicle for me to learn how to gain greater mastery over myself and know that the soul, the inner aspect, has a greater wisdom to guide and direct us, then we're able to be in listening grace. And in that listening grace allows us to say, well, I feel like I want to do this over here, but my inner self is telling me, no, don't go that direction. It's not helpful. Go this direction instead. It's like a whole analogy about driving, and so your impulse tell you, I'm going to keep on driving forward. It's a straight ray, a straight line that gets me to where I want to go. And then your inner prompting tells you, why don't you just veer off and go a different route? You did, you were obedient, and that's one of the qualities. You veered off, and it ended up, you realize you just ended up not getting stuck in traffic for the next 2 hours because of an accident. Yeah. And so that
Yes,
intuitive
exactly.
nature is what the soul is wanting you to evolve towards so that it can help and guide you.
Yes. Sometimes the new choice is unknown. You might have to do a little trial and error.
Oh, yes, definitely, because sometimes trust is the factor that sometimes is needed because you're veering off, but you're a different way, but you're not sure if you're going to get there any quicker. Or maybe it has a problem going on that particular roadway as well.
Yes.
But yeah,
Yes.
so it does require some fine tuning, what I call in my episodes is discernment. You're always fine tuning for greater discernment about what's the voice that's really speaking to me, because it can be an impulse, because we're used to the impulses and we're
Mhm.
driven by many impulses. And now you're on a spiritual path. You're learning to kind of fine tune that. What's an impulse that I really need to go down and follow? It's like, no, it's going to be false gold.
Yeah. But I always explain that these, what we're calling impulses, are real chemicals that are designed to motivate us. So we can't hate our own impulses because this is how our brain works. This is the operating system we've inherited. So we have to learn to manage this system rather than just pretending, oh, I don't care about this, I don't care about that, because you do care because this is the brain we have. And it's sort of like a rider guiding a horse. You can't hate the horse. You can't attack the horse, then you're not going to get it. So a simple way to explain that would be, let's say that a person smokes cigarettes and they want to stop smoking. A lot of the approach today is very negative in the sense that they say you're going to die if you keep smoking. So every time the person feels bad, their brain says, I want a cigarette, because that's how they got wired, is cigarette relieves bad feeling. So when you tell them they're going to die, they feel bad. They want the cigarette even more. So instead, the goal is to say, okay, my brain wants relief from a bad feeling. Let me give it different ways to relieve a bad feeling. And you might want to tell the person to do yoga, but if that person doesn't like yoga, then it doesn't work for them. So for starters, I would give the person something they actually like. Okay? So,
What?
well, so here's the thing. So we all know that just eating, emotional eating, is not a good thing. And yet, everyone sort of observes that if you're in a situation of urgency, like if a person's taking heroin, then they're better off eating donuts and coffee than having the heroin. So we're all trying to find the poison that's less poisonous. So my thing is, if that cigarette would have been for 5 minutes, you can listen to comedy for 5 minutes and enjoy yourself. It's always there. I don't say call a friend, because you don't know if the friend is going to answer and you don't know if they're going to be uplifting. Find something that's uplifting to you and combine it, like if you have gone for 5 hours without a cigarette, you give yourself a cookie. And I even say you can bake cookies that are healthy and have them ready in the freezer. So everyone can design a way that's like a treat for them, and then make a schedule of like how I'm going to reward myself and treat myself when I do the things I need to do, and design it in small enough steps that you can succeed. Like at first, I'm going to listen to comedy for 5 minutes when I would have had a cigarette, and I'll have a cookie every 2 hours if I go for 2 hours without a cigarette. So that wires the brain to expect to feel good. And that's what you want, is like, I could feel good without a cigarette.
Yeah, that's interesting because you're hitting upon a good thing about how we rewire our brain in a way that moves towards a healthier end than the direction which is unhealthy, that hinders the soul's progress because it gets weighed down by this density of energy of bad habits that we have. One of the things that came to my mind is you're talking about an aspect of cultivation, cultivating neural pathways. And in the process of that cultivation, we can also insert and ask our inner self, your soul or the higher self, or whatever you want to call it, the I am presence, Atman. God, help me. Help me to know what I need to do here. Help me to figure out what is the best way for me to repackage this energy that I have, because impulses are based upon energy and conditioning from our past. So we're trying to change some of those patterns of the past. And sometimes it may be challenging, but I think what I'm hearing, what you're saying, it is doable. And that's based upon my background in psychology. It is doable, but it does require an integration process. The integration is knowing that when you identify the behavior or the action that you want to take, that you're trying to change, then is kind of creating a sense of, okay, this is what I said I would do instead. But what you're talking about too, it has to be something that helps with the endorphins. Oh, that helps with a dopamine, which is better, the happy feelings or the happy neurotransmitters that allows a person to feel, oh, this feels good, or I can work on it feeling better, because I'm so used to always getting this over here, which is not healthy for me. I think the overall arching goal is to say, is this healthy for my soul and my soul's evolution? Is this going to help me to continue to evolve and grow and have a greater wisdom and insight that I want to have, or the service that I want to give?
Yes. And we could talk about the threat chemicals. So, in the state of nature, you wake up hungry, you look for food, and you're happy when you find food. But as soon as you find it, it runs out, then you have to find more food the next day. So we've inherited a brain that's constantly seeking, because that's what kept our ancestors alive. It's like you're always that close to more hunger. As soon as you found enough food, then you had to find water, you had to find firewood. So we're always seeking that next thing. Now, in the modern world, we have our physical needs met, and yet we still have this urge to seek because that's what triggers good feelings. In the ancient world, if you walk 10 miles to find water and there's no water there, that's a real survival threat. Threat chemicals are released that tell you this is an urgent situation, you better do something. In today's world, we don't have that risk of dying of thirst and dying of hunger, but we still have this alarm system that's designed to really get your attention and make you take obstacles seriously. And so today, like small obstacles, people can get very upset about, like you get yourself excited because you expect to do this quickly. And then if you can't do something quickly and easily, your alarm system turns on, and then that might throw you back to your old habits of like, what do I do when my alarm system turns on?
What you're really hitting on in terms of these threat chemicals is, for example, cortisol.
Yes.
that gets activated within the individual. And that's a fight, fright, freeze, or appease type of cortisol that is being released in the body. It automatically puts us into an urge or puts us into paralysis as a way to protect ourselves. We don't always know how to deal with this release of these chemicals in our bodies. So we resort to, for example, eating to try to comfort ourselves through it. And so we get into emotional eating aspects of things. Is there a way that we can handle the onset of the threat when it's coming upon us? Are there things that we can do to help ourselves?
First, it's interesting to know that happy chemicals only last for a short time, but a threat chemical can last in your body for a whole hour. If in nature, let's say you smell a lion, then you're looking for evidence of where is the lion. So once that threat chemical turns on, it tells you to look for evidence of threat. And that's what people are doing most of the time, looking for bad things and then saying, see, I was right. I knew there was something bad going on. So then you end up triggering more and you get yourself into a spiral. So the first thing is to really know that it's happening. I was amazed when I discovered this in myself. There was a moment when I felt bad, like something bad was happening. And yet I was in this really good situation. I was like, what do I feel bad about? And I actually rewound the clock and figured out that 5 minutes ago, somebody had a facial expression which I read as disapproval. And it triggered my deep-seated fear of disapproval. It had created the whole thing in my head. And now I was in a wonderful situation, but the chemical was still in me. So we have to just accept that this is the way our brain works and not fuel it by, once you feel bad, it's better to maybe take a little break rather than like if you try to plow ahead and then you just go negative on everything you're doing. I didn't know why, so my husband was in the room, I could have found fault with what he was saying, for example, but it wasn't that at all.
And what you mentioned that we don't have to act on the negative feeling. We can take a break, take a pause in the process. That pause and reflection or for meditation, even if it's just for 5 minutes, is being able to say, okay, let me observe this energy that's coming up in me through the release of cortisol or through the release of other neurotransmitters that are trying to protect me in some ways, but I don't need to act. So I can identify, I can pause. And it gives space then in that pause to breathe. And in the process of breathing, you're asking your inner self, what is it happening here for me? And what do I need to do in order to help to move me through this? You're asking your soul, your inner self. It's the sage aspect of who you are. So it integrates what's going on physically for you and what's occurring for you on a more spiritual level in terms of what do I need to do or nothing I need to do. Just wait. Just
Yeah,
wait. Just
yeah,
hold on.
yeah,
Things will be
yeah.
okay.
And when I said that I had that cortisol from that fear of disapproval, most people have a somewhat disapproving attitude of allowing your childhood fears to drive you. But the reality is that we are wired in childhood, and everyone is running on childhood and adolescent wiring. Our teen years are like that last layer of our brain, and everyone has their last layer of wiring built in their adolescence. We're not going to escape this. The best thing we can do is understand it and say, I have a fear of disapproval because real things happened to me when I was young. And then, like, you could call it self-compassion, to give myself credit for how proactively I try to manage it, but to say, okay, now the threat is over and I can rest rather than projecting disapproval onto everybody around me.
Mhm. And so instead of ruminating, which keeps that negative neural pathway activated. Did I do something wrong? Or could I have done it better? Or, this person thinks I'm this or that. Once you can identify what's going on for you, and then you begin to take some pauses and ask God and invites God into your life to help you see things from a different lens so that you transcend the old pattern or the old habit or the childhood habit, then you can start to make wiser choices. The choice that you make of how you want to interact with that particular situation and your own thoughts allows you to transcend that experience and have different neural pathways start to form. But it takes time for those neural pathways to form. And that's sometimes what people get impatient about.
Yes, exactly.
As you're talking about this wiring and childhood fears, I think that's something that's, does create a challenge because people feel as if since I'm done with my childhood, I should be done with that situation that happened. But if you didn't actively deal with it and try to rewire it in particular ways, why do
Mhm.
you think it's gone away? Is that fair to say?
The childhood pathways are really big. They're like the highway system of the brain. So they don't really go away, they're always there. I think of it as building an exit from the highway. And the next time you're on that highway, to know that you have an exit ramp and you can connect it to a new highway that you're proud of, that you put a lot of effort into building. But you have to keep doing that because our brain is wired in childhood. And instead of seeing that as a weakness, it's important to know that this is an evolutionary triumph. You may hear an animal can run with the herd the day it's born. An elephant walks. When it's born, it walks to its own mother's milk. Humans take a long time to develop because we're born unwired. Nature gave us 10, 20 years to wire. It didn't do that for us to then just say, okay, I'm going to ignore all that wiring. No, that's not how it happens. So we build that wiring and then it's there for life.
Yeah, I'm curious a little bit too, because in the womb, children come out different personalities. So it's as if they have some wiring in them, because they have some interest in things they like and things they don't do that through their screaming or yelling or whatever it may be, what they don't want. It's like Beethoven, she had that natural ability to be able to play the piano. And so this is a balancing act that we're doing between what is evolutionary, which is a lot of what you're talking about is, but also what has come before that allows a child to be so unique or different that, integrates now with the kind of genetics that they have coming into life.
But what people view as personality is caused by early experience far more than we realize. There's a lot of money put into the study of genetics, but almost nobody is studying early experience. If you read biographies of any famous person, you will see that their adult work is basically reproducing their childhood experience. Amazing. I'll give you a simple example. Thomas Edison, when he was 11 years old, he had to go out to work to support his family. So the first thing he did was selling newspapers. Then he sold them on a train. Then he got to work on the train. So while he was 11 years old, he was already working on equipment. And those very formative years of the brain. In those days, there were telegraphs on the train to connect to the station for safety. And those telegraphs would often break down. And here he is sitting on the train doing nothing, and the telegraph breaks. So he starts working on it and fixing it. When he fixes it, he gets a big reward. Our brain is always learning from rewards. Each person listening can think about, what did I do when I was young that I got rewarded for, that I got respected for? That's the thing that you're obsessed with today. Like when we're young, we say, oh, this is what I need to do.
And I think what you're sharing is that innate ability had to do the tinkering came from somewhere. And, and it came to this innate quality that they have, or that a person has, that they're born with. Supposedly, for example, when a person passes or they passes on, they become the body's lighter because something left the body. And it's usually the soul has left the body. The soul has accumulative experiences that we don't always know at the forefront of our brain of all those experiences, but there's certain experiences that that soul is drawing on that has these innate abilities that are natural, and some of them are cultivated over time as well. So that's the uniqueness of this integration, and as we're talking about the relationship between the brain impulses and soul growth, because this all are moving us to be able to evolve and grow from our experiences. What you're talking about is how do we do this in a way that is conscious and intentional so that we can get the best mileage from the experiences that we have.
Yes.
Other thoughts about what happens for individuals that get them stuck? Because you were talking about being aware and then taking a break. And
Mm.
then are there other steps that people can move toward, to help them as they're trying to make a shift?
One thing that got me excited about this subject is when I discovered that monkeys are really competitive. We're told that we shouldn't be competitive, and yet social comparison is something that a monkey is doing every minute. If a young monkey grabs for a banana near a bigger monkey, the bigger monkey is going to bite it. And once it's bitten, that wires it like pain, like, oh, I'm going to avoid grabbing bananas near a bigger monkey. And yet, if I never grab a banana, I'll go hungry. So the little monkey learns to make social comparisons to avoid grabbing around bigger individuals and find weaker individuals effectively where it can grab a banana. This sounds very cruel, and that's why life is complicated. We all have to find healthy ways of managing this social comparison impulse. It's not easy, and we are all managing it with neural pathways built in adolescence and our childhood. So people have home experiences, playground experiences, school experiences, and you end up feeling like everybody else is taking my bananas. So I'm going to take their bananas. This is what we are challenged to manage. If you feel like I'm going to die and starve to death because everybody's taking my bananas, when really you have a good life, you're sort of, creating your own pain and don't even realize it.
And that's a great point because I think we do create our own pain and don't even realize it. The soul wants you to evolve past the monkey brain, the reactions and comparisons, and move into being more intentional about what goes on and realizing that what I call in my podcast is ego persona. So the ego persona is always competitive, always comparing, always wants whatever the other person has. And what we're learning how to be able to do is saying, no, you know what? You do you. Let me figure out what I need to do for my soul growth and my evolution. Realizing my eyes will always go over there, but it doesn't have to stay there, what someone else is doing. And instead, I can say to myself, what is it that I'm able to do now that will allow me to walk a more spiritual Christian path that is alignment with my values? So, how do we anchor ourselves to something that allows us to continue to evolve and grow in a positive, healthy way, as you were saying, as opposed to always saying that if you do this, then I have to do this. If you do that, then I have to do that. But that's kind of doing what everyone else does. You have a uniqueness to your soul, and their brain is unique too.
So I like what you said about your eyes may go over there, but then they don't have to stay there. When I use the analogy of a horse and rider, the horse has to focus on the trail in front of them. And the horse may look here and there, but it's going to be in trouble if it's not looking in front of it. What complicates things, goal excites our dopamine and makes us feel good. But the dopamine stops as soon as you get what you want. That's how it's designed to work. So if you imagine a Stone Age hunter-gatherer walks 5 miles to find the river, and they're very happy when they find the river, but then the good feeling stops when they found the river, and then they have to pursue another goal to get more dopamine. So this is the complication of life, is although you can imagine like unhealthy extreme, a person is never satisfied and always wants more. But that impulse is based on a real thing we have to manage. Dopamine is only sparked by an unmet need. So as soon as a need is met, it stops exciting us. And the most famous example is if a person has a really big goal, like I want to get married or I want to be a doctor. And there's so many steps involved, and they're so excited through each of the steps. But once they achieve that, then they don't have a goal. They don't have a way to spark their dopamine. And the problem with that is that without the dopamine, they may feel like their marriage is bad or their career as a doctor is bad. So the art of life is to set yourself a new goal. And that goal has to be something realistic. Your dopamine is only sparked when it sees that you're actually approaching the goal. So that's the art of life.
I love that. I love the art of life because I think you're hitting on some key components, and that is that once we achieve the goal, it gets satisfied. And so it looks for the next thing to get satisfied, and the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing. And what, from a soul evolution perspective, it is that the higher order is that you're walking a spiritual path to a greater understanding of who you are and being able to express that in life in a way that gives you continuous joy and the abundance of joy in your life is the motor of life that keeps propelling us to continue to move forward. But sometimes we get caught in this lower aspect that you're kind of mentioning of is the brain is always wants the next, the next, the next, the next. But it's saying that has its place, but how do you transcend that to a higher order of awareness that you are that spiritual person having a direction and a meaning for life? And sometimes we're trying to figure out is what's the meaning? You know, what's the meaning of our life? And am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? Or there's more that I need to do based upon who I am, not based upon who other people are.
Yeah, exactly.
As we've been talking about this relationship between the brain and impulses and looking at soul evolution and figuring out where each person, listeners, you think you are in this process and understanding some of the dynamics that Loretta has been talking about, the next aspect is, are there one or two things that would make this so much easier and not so hard?
Yeah, let's see. So I always take a lesson from animal training. People may not like the idea of training themselves like an animal, but it works. So if you think about it, if you tell a dog, I'll give you a steak if you do a flip, the dog is still not going to do a flip because it doesn't know what a flip is and it doesn't know that it can do a flip. But if you give a dog a tiny treat each time it moves in one direction, then it moves in that direction more and more to get another treat. And then soon it's doing a whole flip. And soon you don't need to give it a lot of treats to do a flip because it just has wired that in. So one little treat is enough. So this is the idea of training yourself to do the things that you know you need to do by dividing it up into small steps and then rewarding yourself in healthy ways. This is the subject of all of my books. I also have an online course, and anyone can learn to do this for themselves.
That's a great point because it's by bite-sized pieces that we start to get there and fill ourselves than thinking that we have to have the whole steak or the whole whatever type of food you love. I have to eat it all at once. But in learning new habits or new behaviors that you want to do is real incrementally that we do it and having patience with ourselves to know that we can be able to do that. In the same way is having patience with your soul who's trying to get attuned to and start listening to help you as you're trying to cultivate this new habit or behavior that you're engaging in. So, is there a pearl of wisdom or something that you would like to leave with the seekers as we've been talking about this whole area about what's the relationship between brain impulses and soul growth?
Well, there's one topic I haven't gone into yet. On my website, anyone can see I have dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, endorphin. So the oxytocin piece we could maybe talk about a little. That's the feeling of belonging, togetherness, or bonding. It's really much more complicated than this idealized, romanticized view that people have. Like when you see an animal in a herd and you think, oh, that's so nice, and I wish I had the protection of a herd. And that's the natural thing, to want protection from others. Oxytocin is like, oh, I'm safe. I can let down my guard because other people are protecting me. So if you imagine a zebra is alone, a predator can get it any second. So it has to be constantly alert and can hardly eat because they're looking at the ground when they eat. But when they're in a herd and others are around them, they can lower their guard. So that's the feeling we're looking for. But it's ultimately a selfish feeling. It's like, I want to be protected from the predator. I want you to protect me so that I can eat and meet my needs. And in the animal world, an animal will push its way to the center of the herd where it's safer. But then when they're with the herd too much, they end up eating grass that has been soiled by others. So they really rather go off their own way to have less conflict over food. And they actually get intestinal worms when they eat soiled grass. So the natural urge is to spread out. But then as soon as you smell a predator, you're like, whoa, I want to be protected. I want to hide behind you, and you want to hide behind me. And I want to get protection. So this is the back and forth like that we all have every minute of every day. And we've gotten this idealized notion that we should have this nice sense of safety all the time, and other people are responsible for giving it to us. Any time in your childhood that you did not have a sense of safety is deeply wired in, because the brain is designed to learn. Like in the animal world, you had to learn when to run from a predator. So that's why we've inherited this brain always looking for danger signals and then saying, you should have protected me. You can imagine how this can go on in the workplace too. If we understand this, and we can be grateful that our brain is evolved to make weighing careful decision. When should I go my own way? When should I follow the group? And that we're going back and forth every hour of every day.
Yeah. And what I was thinking of when you were talking about that was psychological safety is what we're always wanting to have in our life, and how sometimes it is a combination, as you're talking about, between individually, that what I need versus what I need to feel safe in a group or at a workplace or in the relation. So it's kind of a balancing act that one is always. I would invite everyone to always think about it with the soul in mind. How does the soul help me to feel a greater sense of wholeness and completeness as I'm thinking about each day of my life moving forward? Also, some of the pearls of wisdom that Loretta has been giving to you. So as we're winding down here, what's the phrase you want to leave with people?
You have power over your mammal brain.
Touche. Totally agree. And I would just add to that, because this is Mastering Life's Adventures, being your best self through soul evolution. Acknowledge yourself, welcome yourself into the conversations that you're having as you're trying to learn and grow, through this kind of lower brain to the higher awareness of who you truly are. Thank you, Loretta. It's been a pleasure talking with you about this. And seekers, we hope you give this some thought and see where it leads you. Take care. Bye for now.
Thank you for joining me for this episode on Mastering Life's Adventures, being your best self through soul evolution. If you have enjoyed what you've heard today, I would be delighted if you would share this episode with others, leave a thumbs up, and subscribe to my Mastering Life's Adventures podcast. Look forward to your joining the next episode. Please leave any comments or suggestions you might have below. Bye for now.